Thank you very much, Debbie. So thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our council chamber. A little late this morning. It's Personnel Committee this morning, not standards, Councillor Loudon. I'm your chair, Councillor Eleanor Reynolds, and I would like to welcome anybody who's watching this meeting online to the live stream. I'm going to actually, before we go on to the roll call, I just want to say that this is actually Jo's last meeting with us because she's moving on to pastures new. And I just wanted to thank her hugely for all the work she's done in updating our policies and all the way we do things to do with HR over the last 3 years?
Yes.
3 years. Yeah, 3 and a bit years. So she's moving on, well, to hopefully a nicer job with them. But I just wanted to thank you hugely for all the work that you've done for us in updating all our policies, which we're sorely in need of it. And I think that John wanted to say something as well, but do you want to say it at the end, John, or now at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you, and we wish you so well in your new job. So
just behave then.
we're going to move on now to the roll call, and Debbie's going to take over from here, and hopefully, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I'll start the roll call. Morning, members, and also if you could let me know if you have any interests to declare as we go around the room, that would be really helpful. I will start with you, please, Chair. Councillor Eleanor Reynolds.
Present, and no interests, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Loudon.
Present and no interest, Debbie, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to who I see in the room, Councillor Kevin Blakey. Good morning.
Morning, I'm present, no declarations.
Thank you very much. Next to Councillor Tim Dumper. Good morning, Tim.
Morning, Debbie. Thank you for your help in all this. Present, and I have no interests to declare.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Paul Hayward. Good morning, Paul.
Present, no declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony McCullum. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. Present and no declarations.
Thank you very much. So we have quite a few apologies, which I'll get to in a second, Chair, but back to you. We are quorate.
Thank you very much, Debbie. We have Councillor Arnott walking through the door. I'll just let him get settled and then we'll just double check that he's here and has no declarations, and may have some declarations, who knows. Agenda item 1 is minutes of the previous meeting. So if anybody has any amendment they want to bring to these minutes or any questions or queries, can you please raise your hand now? Otherwise, I'm going to presume that you are happy with these minutes and deem them fit for acceptance. I can't see anybody raising any hands. Are you happy to pass these minutes then?
Yes.
It was a long time ago. I know you may not remember, but so all in favour? Okay, thank you. Everybody's in favour of the minutes. Thank you, Debbie. Agenda item 2, apologies. Debbie, over to you, please.
Yep, so I have had apologies from Councillors Aurora Bailey and Brian Bailey, Councillor Jenny Brown, Councillor Nick Hookway and Councillor Melanie Martin. Are there any more apologies that anyone is aware of? Yes.
Councillor Eileen Ragg.
Thank you very much. And now that Councillor Arnott has made it into the room, good morning. Can you just confirm that you're present and if you have any declarations to make?
None, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody. So we've already done agenda item 3. Agenda item 4, public speaking. I believe there are no members of the public registered to speak to this.
None today, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency still. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items for consideration today still, I believe. Agenda item 7, we go straight to Jo Fellows, our head of HR. Jo, over to you, please. The pay and policy statement.
Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks, Chair. This is our usual annual review of the pay policy statement, which is required under the Localism Act. Hopefully it's very straightforward this year because no changes are proposed at all, other than obviously updating the date to 2025-26. As part of the pay policy statement, we also annually review the pay multiplier, which is the difference between the highest and the lowest paid within the council. As you'll see in the report, the pay multiplier is still well within our agreed sort of policy range, which is 10 to 1, and our pay multiplier for the new year is 5.7 to 1, so we're well within the boundaries of that policy. So there isn't really anything else really to say on this item unless anybody's got any questions. Once it is approved by personnel, it will then go on to council, and then once that's been approved, it will be published on the website in the usual way from April onwards.
Thank you, Jo. So we have a recommendation, which that we recommend to council the adoption of this pay policy statement for 25-26. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to make about this document? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So are you happy that we recommend this? Okay, so if you are in favour of recommending this to council, this document for 25-26, would you please raise your hands now? I think that's unanimous, thank you. Brilliant. Okay, on to agenda item 8, which is the HR policies update. Now, Jo, over to you again, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this report covers 4 policies. So what I'll do is go through each of them in turn. And it's part of our sort of ongoing review of our HR policies within the team. So the first one is the probationary policy, and this is set out in Appendix 1 of the report, which is page 15. At the moment, we haven't got a specific probationary policy, and probation is when new employees start with the council and the arrangements for the first 6 months that they're with us. So as I say, we haven't got a current specific policy. It is covered in our other policies. And we felt within HR that it would be helpful to have a specific policy, as it would aid understanding for managers and also employees about their obligations, responsibilities and so on. In effect, the policy sets out what we're already doing in practice, so it's nothing new, but it's just providing that clarity. And it talks about, for example, the requirements around for managers and employees to ensure the appropriate training, support, regular monitoring and communication when people start in new roles within the council. It also talks about, there's a section in there about where people move between roles in the council, where there isn't a formal probationary period, but obviously we would expect managers and employees to work together to ensure that employees were fully aware of the requirements of the role through training and support and so on as well. So it clarifies that as well. The government have announced future changes to the employment protection rules, which is when employees can begin to claim unfair dismissal. It's all part of their new act, but we don't know the details yet of this employment protection and the probationary elements of that. We may need to obviously review our policy as and when we get that clarity from government around those statutory changes. And obviously at that point, we'll look at the policy again. But I think a lot of it is good practice anyway. So it's, it's around probably more around the duration of probation that we might have to look at in line with any statutory changes. But obviously until we get the detail, we won't know that. I've consulted with Unison on this policy, and they are happy with it and have had no particular comments or feedback. So that's a positive. So I'm just happy to again take your comments and queries.
Thank you, Jo. So does anybody have any comments or queries on is it strictly probation policy right now? aren't we? Yeah. Just on the probation policy, please. No, I mean, sorry, Councillor Dumper, please. Yes, Tim.
Just to say, I think it's an excellent and good policy, and I think we should support it.
Thank you, Tim. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? Okay, so we will at the end vote on all 3 of these, assuming they're uncontentious. John, Councillor Loudon.
Chair, can I suggest we take each of the 3 separately, because they are separate issues?
Okay, that is a fair point. So let's vote on this now then. If you're in favour of adopting the probation policy, would you please raise your hand now? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so moving on then, Jo, to the minimum notice periods.
Yeah, thank you. So when we were writing the probationary policy, it made us then have another look at our notice provisions, and this is the notice that employees need to give us, but also what we need to give employees. So it's on both sides. And we thought it would be good, it'd be worth sort of making some changes to the notice provisions. Alongside that, we had a look when we were reviewing the notice provisions, we had a look at the National Conditions of Service, and it does actually state in the National Conditions of Service that the minimum notice periods that employers should give employees should align with their usual pay period, which obviously for us is a month. Now, our notice provisions had a minimum of a week, which would be during the probationary period. So obviously we weren't in line with the national conditions of service. So that's really why we've decided, to propose a change to the notice provisions as set out in Appendix 2, page 22 of the report. Again, we've spoken to Unison regarding this, and they are happy with the changes. The only thing that they talked about, because you'll notice in here that it talks about the notice provisions that we need to give employees is in weeks, but the notice provisions that employees need to give us is in months. And that's a bit of a technicality, really, because in statute it talks about weeks. But Unison was sort of saying, and we were chatting it through with them, actually, would it make sense to have them both in weeks or months? And I think that's probably a good idea. It just makes it simpler for everybody. So that would be the only sort of slight amendment to what you see in the report here, that we go with either weeks or months. But other than that, again, fairly straightforward, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, that was going to be my question, because I know I asked it last time about the weeks, months thing, and you said it came from the wording of national policies. So it's coherent to keep it that way, but depends on what changes are made to those, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, you could go either way, as long as we make sure that the minimum in weeks, so the 12 weeks have to be at least 12 weeks. We make that equate to the months, but it's semantics, really. It's whether we want to worry about it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be put to the test at some point, but it's fairly uncomplicated.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Joe about the Councillor Hayward? Paul, please.
Thank you. I suppose on that, my only observation there is that it would seem to be more practical for it to be weeks across the board, because in that first section, which the minimum period of notice to which you are entitled is as follows: for 5 years to 12, it's on a weekly basis, and therefore it might be difficult to translate that into a month equivalent. Whereas if you make everything weeks, and 1 month, would be 4, some will be 12 or 13, you do the rounding, whatever. But then it would be consistent. I do agree. It's semantics, but it seems to switch to weeks gives you that bit more flexibility than the month period.
So I suppose I do have a question pursuant on that, which is, are people paid for weekly or monthly?
They're paid monthly, but to be honest, if we go with weeks, it won't make any difference in terms of calculating. They base it on the end date, so it wouldn't be a particular issue from payroll terms.
So it wouldn't cause any knock-on problems later. Okay, so apart from tidying up, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm slightly distracted. Right, so does anybody else have any more comments? Do you want to go and delude somewhere? I think you just found the grounds in the bottom of his cup. That's Blackdown House coffee. So does anybody else have any comments or tweaks or anything that they would like to have considered? Are you happy to vote on this now? So if you are in favour of adopting these changes to the minimum notice periods, would you please raise your hand now? No, and that's unanimous again. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to the use of temporary workers and volunteer policies, please, Joe.
Yeah, so I'll go on the temporary workers first. And this is around, it's not employees on fixed term contracts. This is about when we engage agency, casuals, interims, consultants, those sorts of workers. We have got a policy and we've reviewed it, as you can see here, again, to provide greater clarity, particularly around, I get lots of questions from managers about whether, for example, if you've got an interim in, whether they need to do our usual mandatory training. And we didn't really have a clear policy decision on that. So those sorts of things are covered in this revised policy. We also have to ensure that we follow procurement rules and our financial standing orders and so on as part of procuring or engaging these sorts of workers. That was already in the policy, but again, we've clarified that further. And the same around the HMRC requirements, which are called IR35, which apply to some workers of payroll. So again, it was already in the policy. We have been working to those requirements, but it just provides a bit more clarity for managers to help managers to understand their responsibilities. Again, Unison are very happy with this policy, didn't have any comments or queries. And I think it's fairly straightforward, but again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jo. I did have one question actually, before I move out to debate or questions, and that's in the volunteers part, the risk assessment grid, the equalities assessment.
Yeah.
There's both negative outcome and positive outcome ticked for the carers and care leavers and armed forces. And I just wonder whether that was a typo.
I think
suspect
that
it
is a
probably
typo, yes. No, it should be just positive.
Okay, that's what I
outcomes,
thought.
yeah.
So otherwise I was going to ask why there was a negative outcome there.
Yeah,
but
no,
that's
there
good to
isn't.
know. So that
Yeah.
will be changed.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Jo or comments or? Okay, so are you happy to go straight to Councillor Dumper, Tim, please?
Yeah, just to say, Chair, I wonder, Joe, whether the IR35 regulations have been very controversial in some employment sectors, and I wonder whether you'd had any comments or questions on that over the time.
No, not particularly. I think managers sometimes feel a bit frustrated that they have to go through that process, but we're very clear in HR and payroll that it's a non-negotiable. You have to, and we've got really clear procedures. So I think this just, and what we're planning on doing as well off the back of these policies once they're agreed is a further briefing session for managers. So I think it's helpful just to every so often reiterate the responsibilities, but no particular issues.
Thanks for that question, Tim. Does that answer? Yeah. Okay, so are there any more questions? I think we can go to a vote then. If you're happy to accept this policy, these revised policies, would you please raise your hand now? That's unanimous again. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. So moving on swiftly to agenda item 9, which is the people data.
Sorry.
Oh, hang on.
There's one about the volunteers policy.
Oh, I thought you'd done them both
sorry, I didn't.
together.
No, shall I just quickly?
Okay, because they were in the.
Oh, they were both on, right, okay.
Yeah.
Shall I just
Do you want to
quickly-
talk about? Yeah, but we've already voted on it. Is the problem?
Oh, right, that's fine then.
Because
I'll
they were lumped
yours.
together.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
unless people want to talk about the volunteers policy separately. I thought it would. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry.
The only thing I thought it was maybe it was a little bit compelling, not compelling, a bit authoritarian for volunteers, some of it, but then it is probably needed.
Yeah, it's the compliance bit, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Okay, so given that we've already voted on that, we can talk about it, but we've already voted on it, so I'm going to move on to agenda item 9 now, please. People data, that's back to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is the usual update on our key workforce data. And as you'll see in the report, this covers the period up to the end of October. It's a bit difficult because this time, obviously, we've changed the data, the layout of the data to align with the new directorate structures. So it's going to be a bit difficult to compare when you're looking at sort of service-specific data, compare it with our previous people data reports. But obviously, as for the organisation as a whole, you will be able to compare. Obviously, there is a summary in the report of particular areas to note, but I thought maybe just to pick up on some of them. We have had a small increase in headcount, but still within budget. The increase in headcount is linked to our increase in grow our own apprentices and graduate recruitment, which you'll hear an update about in a moment. And we've also really helpfully been able to recruit to some of the housing posts that we were previously struggling with. We have increased the market supplement numbers from 11 to 23. We did, at the last Personnel Committee meeting when we reported the data, we did say then that there was going to be an increase because we'd had some additional market supplement requests coming through. So it hasn't come as a surprise to us that we have got an increase. These all relate to surveyor posts within the housing service where we had a really difficult issue with being able to recruit and retain housing surveyors. It's one of those groups that, again, generally, there are difficulties in recruiting. Thankfully, the market supplement appears to have done the trick and we're in a far better, more stable position as a result of having the market supplement in place. So that is a positive. We will continue, as we do already, to review market supplements annually, and we'll be doing the next review ready for the new financial year. So we're working on that at the moment. Although looking at the market sort of anecdotally, I don't think there will be that significant change in the number of market supplements. I think where we have got market supplements, you know, those areas like surveyors, solicitors and so on are still really tricky in the market. So I think that those sort of numbers around the 23 mark are probably likely to continue. In terms of vacancies, it's looking really positive. We've had a reduction from 44 to 32 since April. And of those 32, many of them, when we did the reporting, we'd got, you know, decisions around applicants and so on. They just hadn't started with us, which is why they were still in the numbers. Time taken to fill vacancies is also reduced, and we've seen a reduction in agency worker numbers too, as we've been able to permanently recruit to various posts. So it's definitely, you know, looking more positive than 3 years ago, for example, when I started. I think the biggest concern is sickness absence. We're still way above our target of 8.5 days per FTE, as we have been, you know, for a number of years, and certainly since I've been here. Based on current projections, our end of year absence figure will be around 9.68 days lost per FTE compared to 10.05 days at the end of last year. Again, our figures though are comparable with other councils. We are getting now a much improved benchmarking tool where we can benchmark our people data figures with other councils, and that sort of 10 days per FTE figure is about where other councils of a similar size and type are. And, you know, anecdotally, again, in the, you know, the wider economy, absence does generally continue to be higher than before the pandemic. So what we're seeing is, you know, is the norm. It's not good, but it just tends to be the norm. Interestingly, if we take long-term sickness absence, which is more than 2 months out of the data, that would result in the average number of FTE days lost reducing. So per month, it would go down to 3.76 days per FTE per month compared to 5.65 if you include everything. So you can see therefore where the long-term absence does sort of skew the figures to an extent. And I mean, if you've sort of put that in context, that figure, if you took out the long-term absence for this period that we're reporting on, that's 994 days of absence for 13 people. So you can see again that impact it has on the data. Long-term absence tends to be related to areas such as musculoskeletal issues, personal stress, anxiety, those sorts of things. And, you know, we continue to use all of our provisions to support employees to try and facilitate an early return to work, such as occupational health advice, employee assistance programme and so on. So, you know, we continue to work closely with managers and employees, particularly in terms of long-term absence, but across all absence, to manage that and support to try and, as I say, facilitate an early return to work. Interestingly as well, the data also that was shown this time shows a spike in positive COVID cases in July. It was at the highest level since we started reporting, which admittedly was after the pandemic. But I think that's interesting that, you know, there was that particular spike, including me, during July around COVID. So obviously that has had an impact on the figures as well. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Jo. So thank you for highlighting all the positives as well, because actually it's quite clear that it's taking less time to recruit at the moment, and we have fewer vacancies than we've had at any point. Councillor Loudon, you have something to say?
Thank you, Jo. As Chair says, it's positive in many ways. So just taking your report as we've got it in front of us. So if I turn in particular to section 4, so we've highlighted the issue around vacancies and the recruiting there. And if we link that into 4.5 in terms of the types of roles that we've been able to attract, I think that's all a very positive situation. And in part, it has to do with the pay and reward arrangements that you helped to bring in 18 months, 2 years ago, thereabouts. 4.8, so we're talking there again about a reduction in the average time taken to fill vacancies. That's really important. Again, to make sure that we're able to cover the gaps that are created by vacancies, and it takes a little bit of pressure off those who are left behind, who end up having to be stretched in order to cover. Pleasing to see in 4.9 the use of agency staff, the reliance on agency staff has reduced. Sometimes people say we shouldn't have any agency staff. I would disagree. I can see a role, a small role, for the use of agencies in order to help fill the gaps occasionally. And then turning to 4.11 and the working days lost, I think what you've just spoken to is a reflection of what you have said, without making you sound boring. You've said this repeatedly when you've presented the data to us, and that is, if you strip out the long-term absences, our short-term absences are much better than the figures perhaps give lie to. And it's always very difficult in any organisation to really effectively manage long-term absences. And I think, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, when what you were talking about in terms of what our target is for absence, a target is often quite arbitrary. And I suppose in some ways this target has been here for a number of years. Life has changed in the last 5 years, as we know, in all sorts of ways, both in terms of the recruitment and retention difficulties across the whole of local government and generally the economy, the issue of sickness and how people approach staying away from work when they are unwell, and also the employer's approach to that as well. And I suppose what we're looking at is we're comparing absence against an arbitrary target, and you could drop it, 10 days one way or another, and it would have a very significant impact, positive or negative. So I'm slightly less worried about our target and whether we're actually onto it. And as you say, I think the short-term figures are very useful, and I think they're showing a positive trend within the organisation. So it's useful for us to see this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair, very much. And if this isn't the right moment, stop me if there's an AOB possibility. Obviously, the majority of the agenda today, which is splendid, and I think I'd like to congratulate particularly Joe and Tracy for the fruits that are now coming through around the restructuring, which is really good to see. We will be needing to switch from scrutiny mode to overview mode at some point, and I wouldn't want today's meeting to go by without us as members recording our concern and empathy for our staff and officers as we move ahead into local government reconstruction. And I'm aware that I believe communications between the executive leadership team and the staff are excellent. Messages are being sent very clearly, but it strikes me at some point we're going to have to, on future agendas, start picking this up as progress becomes made and as we may need to be working with other councils and so forth. Hopefully, this is something that won't have a terminal effect, so to speak, on our staff and officers for at least 2 years. But we'll know that in the next couple of weeks. But I just thought I'd drop that in now and see how we may include this in our work moving forward.
I
Thank you.
suppose that in time we may start to see effects of restructuring and change in sickness rates, for
and
example.
turnover rates and so on. Yeah, and I think that's important. We have obviously the people data as a standing item anyway on the agenda to just keep an eye on that and what we can do to mitigate against that.
Does anybody have any more questions? Because I did have. Tracy, do you want to come in, please, at this point?
I was just going to support what Paul's saying. We do need to, as an organisation, also be aware that this will be a time of change for staff. and we need to recognise how valued the staff are within this organisation. And as an organisation, because we still are East Devon District Council, and we will be for at least 2 years, if not 3 or 4, as an organisation, we still need to do the business as usual, the day job. The staff are employed to do those roles, and those roles will be required when we move into, if we move into, a new organisation. So I think there is a key role here to monitor how staff are feeling, how staff are valued, and how we support staff to ensure that they're able to continue to do their roles and understand what those changes will mean for them.
Thanks, Tracy. Obviously, this organisation is its people. We can't, some of the skills is what makes everything happen. So it's very, very important to look after our people. I actually, if nobody else has got any questions from the floor, I actually do have a question, which I have to channel through Tracy, actually. Tracy, the 4 services, are they roughly equal in size now?
I guess it depends on whether we're talking about output, input, experience, the professional qualifications required, or staff full-time numbers or budgets.
Okay, so I was actually asking about numbers of people, I guess.
So at the moment, I would say, without having it in front of me, I would say our frontline services have more staff than our back office support services. But I think it's also worth mentioning that it's not always appropriate to have the same amount of officers within each team, within each directorate, because they're doing very different roles. And managing 5 professional officers that do the same thing is very different to managing 5 officers or managers that are doing very different things. It's a very different skill set. So I wouldn't want us to get lost in the numbers when we're talking about the structures.
So thank you for that, John. So the reason I was asking was because I perceive that maybe some services are under more stress than others, and I think that may be visible in the sickness data.
So what might be helpful to add then, Eleanor, is there is an expectation here, and should be across organisations, that there is resilience within teams, and that managers are only managing an amount of officers rather than managing too many. And as part of our restructure, we haven't just looked at putting the right people in the right teams, we've looked at ensuring that those officers have the resilience and that the managers are able to manage them without it being over capacity.
I suppose where the way I was heading with that was that it seems that where more vacancies are is also where there's more sickness absence at the moment. So I'm just wondering whether that the lag in recruiting is causing knock-on problems with those particular services, and whether that's something we can address through personnel in some form. Joe,
I mean, I would say, I think I don't know whether there is a correlation. I think the vacancy, you tend to have greater vacancies and greater sickness absence generally. I'm not just talking about East Devon, in those sort of frontline type roles. So, we're talking about housing and health, for example. Now, how long a vacancy is vacant may be a factor, but I don't think it's an overriding factor. I think it is, a lot of it is about the nature of the work that people are doing. And, as we've seen, the period within which vacancies are vacant has reduced. So I think we're much better as an organisation now at managers really getting on top of that and addressing it, quickly, so that we haven't got that gap for too long.
It definitely all seems to be heading in the right direction, for which I can only be thankful. John, Councillor Loudon.
Just, you're asking about the different numbers by directorate, and if you look at the head count, which is the first page of the appendix, where we've got all the detailed data that Joe's provided, that gives that there. The one point I would say is you've got 4 directors and a chief executive. The director of place seems to have 250 times as many staff to look after than the chief executive.
think it's the Chief Executive Service, John. Yeah, so
Accepting that seriously, she looks after the whole of the council.
exactly. Of course. I thought the spike in COVID cases this summer will probably not come as a surprise to very many people, but is quite remarkable. And, you know, kudos to the 67 people who only 67 days that were taken by 20 people, which is only slightly more than 3 days, which, considering that it's been a nasty version, is impressive. And potentially, are they coming back too early, really? Right, are there any more questions on this data? Well, the leader leaves the room. I don't think anybody has any more questions. So if you, we're just noting these, aren't we? So if we have no more questions and no more comments, then we're going to move on to agenda item 10, which is driving at work policy. Please, Joe, over to you. Is it,
over to Matt.
Over to Matt. Hello, Matt.
Good morning,
Yes, please.
everybody. Thank you, Chair. As you probably noticed, the report was actually written by Jeremy Pritchard, who's our lead on corporate health and safety, but unfortunately he gives his apologies, he can't be here today, so I'm presenting on his behalf. So as part of the Council's responsibility as an employer, we have to make arrangements to deliver on our health and safety requirements on the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act. And to assist in that, we've got a number of policies and procedures in place that sets out standards and approach to work. One of these is the driving at work policy, which, as you'll note, has been a little bit out of date and needed updating. We've got an ongoing programme for updating all of these. This is the first one, I think, that's come through personnel for a little while. So there's an ongoing programme of those. So the policy itself, hopefully, is relatively self-explanatory. You will note in the report that accompanies the actual policy itself, there are a few key revisions that have been made, taking account some of the changes that we've had within the council, a few new sections around fleet and driver conduct and fitness to work, a new section on alcohol and drugs, smoking and vaping, and I suspect many of these won't be a surprise to anybody who's ever worked in this sort of field before, things like mobile phones and journey planning. And the key bit at the end is a new section around risk assessment, given a generic update. So overall, this is a policy that fits in with many policies that you'll see out there. We don't do anything particularly different to any other council, so it very much links into what you would see elsewhere. It is just an update. We did also send it through to Unison to have a look. We only had the response back last night, but they've only picked up on one particular aspect, and that was on page 62 of the bundle 4.63 about where a risk assessment identifies a need for training. They asked a question, would funding of the training be provided by East Devon District Council? The answer is yes, it would. Any sort of health and safety at work training that's required for staff would be expected to be covered within the organisation's budget. And also there was a question about what happens if they were to take the training and to fail. Well, as you've probably noticed, this policy is quite a generic policy. It deals with sort of general driving issues. You would not expect anyone to fail one of these courses. It would be like an update course. So that wouldn't really be an issue. If it was a more specific issue, say around, say a sweeper driver, and that is specific training to that vehicle, that would then probably become a capability issue. So it kind of falls outside this policy and goes within a separate area. So in overall terms, we don't think there's anything there that should concern the union once we go back on those two issues. So ultimately, hopefully, this this policy will help support the council in achieving its health and safety responsibilities, and we recommend that the committee approves the policy as it is written. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. I just had one question, which is about prohibitive versus prohibited substances. It says prohibitive throughout both documents, and I believe it should be prohibited. So that's my little, apparently, Trevor Copery for the day. So does anybody have any questions for Matt? Paul Hayward and then Kevin, please, Blakey.
Thank you. The first observation is on page 65 of the report, section 10, about the use of mobile phones, electronic devices. There's a section
Which
there.
page, sorry? 64?
Sorry? Yeah, page 55.
55.
65, section 10, mobile phones, electronic devices. It's under the introduction, the actual report itself. The East Devon Driving at Work policy, section 10, relates to mobile phones and electronic devices. and there's exceptions. And I believe, from comparison, those exceptions have come from the gov.uk site. The only observation I would make there is the second exception says safely parked, and that's a little bit ambiguous because you can be parked and still in breach. You need to be parked with your ignition off, and I think those two words should be added on because it could lead someone to park up, leave their ignition running, use a mobile phone, and then be found wanting. So it's that's just a semantic point, a couple of extra words. The other issue, and this is probably a more technical one or practical, fueling of company vehicles. Why is our preferred supplier Tesco's using the All-Star card? I appreciate other fuel providers are available. Is it just convenience? There's more Tesco's ones around. There are other garages, or is it on a cost basis?
So
Yeah, that's
two
questions. Thank you.
questions, I think probably for you, Matt. So the first one, safely parked, does it have a legal definition, or is that something that we can amend? Does safely parked mean something in law, or is it?
I believe Councillor Hay was correct, so yeah, we can make that amendment.
Okay,
That's not a problem.
fantastic.
With
Thank
regard
you.
to the second question, I don't know the answer to that one. I have to check with our fleet manager because that'll come from them rather than being a safety issue per se.
Thank you very much for those questions, Paul. Kevin Blakey, Councillor Blakey, please. You're next.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of relatively small points, I think. With regard to the grey fleet, that is people using their own private vehicles for council purposes. As councillors, we have to provide evidence of the fact that our vehicles are taxed and insured. That if we are to claim any kind of travel allowance, this policy does not seem to include the same requirement on employees. My particular concern is that any insurance should be quite specific in terms of its suitability for whatever the vehicle is being used for, because there are...
I believe we might be able to answer that question from the chair, actually. 4.7, item 2, says make sure that any vehicle, regardless of ownership, provided for use at work, is properly maintained, is in a roadworthy condition, is appropriately taxed, has a valid MOT certificate and insurance covering business use.
Beg your pardon, missed that. Okay, fine.
Is there something else?
There was one tiny little thing otherwise, which is under, if we go to page 65 again, and it's back to mobile phones. Drivers must not text, make calls, take photos. Should that not be make or take calls? Because I think there is a subtle difference between the two.
Is that in one of the bullet points? Hang on.
It's covered in the first paragraph. Page 65, item 10.
Okay, so is your concern that it's too prescriptive and doesn't...
Well, I think what it, to me, would suggest is you can't call out, but there is not there a requirement not to receive an incoming call while you're driving, and I think...
So I think is this item not more about handheld mobile phone use? Because I don't think for later on there's stuff about dashboard mounted and things that are safely when no mobile phone is safely on the dashboard. I'm going to probably go back to Matt on that actually. Is this bit specifically about handheld use, or does it include dashboard mounted?
I think that section does work with the handheld use. You could argue that whole second sentence on that basis wouldn't be necessary, so it'd be easier just to add in make or take calls, because ultimately you shouldn't be using it handheld at any point.
No.
So it doesn't matter what you're using it for, you shouldn't be using it.
So
you
but
could argue
that
it's almost
paragraph
like
is entirely about handheld use and doesn't cover
section,
dashboard
yeah.
use. Okay. So when it's properly mounted on a dashboard holder thing, or yeah. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yes, thanks.
So is that it? Any more? Okay, does anybody else have any more questions for Matt? No, I'm not seeing any questions. John, do you have anything to ask? Oh, Paul Arnott, please, Councillor Arnott.
Yes, just to follow up on Councillor, I'm a bit hard of hearing today, so I think I heard right. And I think Councillor Hayward raised the Tesco's question. And I think we were saying it would be good for as much to be done through Tesco's as possible, because rather than at the depot, I think maybe that was it. But my question is, who gets the club card points? And it's a semi-serious question.
Okay, so if it's a semi-serious question, then I have to put it semi-seriously to Matt. Who gets the club card points, Matt?
I refer to my previous answer. I'll have to ask.
You'll get an answer to that in due
Yes, I
course,
will.
leader.
Because, Chair, that's a
Not
lot
to be
of
spent
club
on
card
sandwiches
points.
by the leader.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Right, are there any more questions, comments, etc., etc.? No, are we voting on this?
Yes.
We are voting on this. If you are happy to accept this new policy, would you please raise your hand now? Thank you, that's unanimous. Moving on swiftly. Agenda item 11, the Grow Our Own update. And I think, although it says Joe, I think it's Gemma who's doing this one, isn't it?
It is.
Thank
Hello.
you, Gemma.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma. I'm the new HR Operations Manager. I started just over 2 months ago, so I haven't met you yet, but hello.
Welcome.
So we're just going to put it up on the screen, but also it is included in the agenda. I was just bringing this today to update everyone from April to December on what's been happening in terms of our Grow Our Own programme, and also talk about what we're looking to focus on in the coming year. So we've got our Grow Our Own numbers there at the top. So we have currently 20 apprentices, 1 graduate, and we had in this period 4 work experience students. Just to highlight really good news that in terms of our apprenticeship numbers at 20, that is an increase of just over 81% from the previous year. So the team have worked really hard to increase our apprenticeship numbers within the council. And we've just listed there some recent successes. So we have 2 new maintenance operatives, and those are new apprenticeship offers within the council. We also have 1 arborist apprentice. We have had 1 previously, but quite a while ago. So that is sort of reinstated apprenticeship for the council. We've got 1 management trainee graduate through the LGA, completing their level 7 in leadership and management. Our pathway to planning graduate has successfully been recruited and is now commencing their level 7 in town planning. And last year, the team were able to secure a dedicated Grow Our Own budget to be used for salaries of apprentices moving forward. And as I mentioned earlier, we had 4 work experience placements. They were from Honiton and Sidmouth, and that was a new corporate programme that was delivered, and that was received really well by the students that attended that. So in terms of what we're looking to focus on this year, linked to the budget that was secured, we need to finalise plans for managers to make bids to that budget so they can use that to increase our apprenticeship numbers across the council. We will continue to deliver the corporate work experience programme and start to plan that for this summer. We want to look at developing promotional material that is specifically targeted for those as part of our Grow Our Own programme to support recruitment and attraction of talent. Look to recruit a supported intern. And this aims to assist young people with learning disabilities to develop their skills and gain confidence in paid employment. Linked to the work experience programme, we want to work with the Deaf Academy to offer meaningful work experience to their students and open opportunities there. And then finally, work with care experienced young people, look to engage with Devon County Council's local offer to support care experienced young people, whether that be through work experience or opening up our apprenticeship opportunities to them. And then on the final page, it's just some sort of pictures and summaries linked to the recent successes that we've had, that you can sort of look at your own leisure. But any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Gemma. And I want to actually thank Joe as well for over the last 3 years for really very much developing the methods by which young people come to work for us, because it's so crucial. And obviously apprenticeship schemes is about more than young people, but by this means we have managed to gain so many more young people in the organisation, which is a real boost of energy to what we do, and offers hope for the future. Well, although, well, these jobs will still be needed post restructuring. But, you know, it is wonderful. I think the work that you've done in this has been wonderful, and much appreciated. And thank you, Joe, and thank you, Gemma, for carrying on with it.
And all I was going to say, Chair, was Gemma has got a background around Grow Our Own as well, particularly around care leavers. She's established the care leave employability programme at Devon County Council. So I think that area
Absolutely marvellous.
particularly, and working with internships and so on, will be able to continue the good work.
That's a phenomenal background, and I'm so glad you're with us, because I think it's very hard for people who are leaving care to actually get work experience because they don't have parents and networks to call on. So if we can offer that, that's actually value added for those young people as well as, you know, as well as for us getting their skills, is actually us offering them what a family would offer, which is wonderful. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing that to us as well. Are there any questions, comments? Councillor Dumper, Tim, please.
Thank you, Eleanor. Yes, an amazing feat, and particularly I wanted to focus on the Deaf Academy, because I think bringing people from what's a successful institution over in Exmouth is great, and hope that work continues and magnifies. Just one point, and that is that about mentioning that it's Honiton and Sidmouth schools generally at the moment. There are other bits, obviously, over towards Axminster, Colleton, and in Exmouth, where we have the biggest comprehensive school in the country, virtually. So I would ask that those be focused on as well.
Thank you, Tim. I think Joe would quite like to pick up on that.
I was just going to say, Tim, in terms of the school engagement, we are engaged with all the East Devon secondary schools. We've had a meeting with all the careers leads of all the schools. It's just happened that those two schools were the ones that had students who wanted to work with us, but we have got those links, and we'll continue to maintain that. And when we go out for this summer with our offer, it will be to all the careers leads across all the schools.
Thank you. Does anybody have Councillor Arnott? Paul, please.
Yes, thank you. And I was going to say the same as Tim about the Deaf Academy. And it is remarkable, and it's a leading national institution. And if you go there and meet the management and the senior academic team, incredibly progressive. So it's fantastic to see us hoping to be more aligned with them. And also, I'm very much enjoying the number of photographs of Tracy and Mel with all and Simon with various certificate holders. But I wonder if we could get a photograph of you with young Andy Wood, our own apprentice, who I think has been, and I've never quite understood how a distinguished officer in his middle years can have been doing an apprenticeship. But well done to him. I think we should give him a little certificate if he hasn't had one already. Thank you.
Hence my comment about apprenticeships being for people of all ages. And I know that we have other officers who are also engaged in apprenticeship programmes at the moment, aren't they?
And he will get a pin for his lanyard, as I have from
Excellent.
So yes, all our existing staff who do apprenticeships.
He'll get a little
also
pin.
Gets a little pin for his
Oh,
lanyard. So
that's
yes.
sweet.
I did have a question, actually. It was about the, because we were talking about this just before the meeting began, about graduate recruitment. And we know that as a sector, we have problems with particular areas of recruitment. I just wondered whether the LGA is targeting recruitment on universities that offer courses that might lead to areas where we have shortages, such as quantity surveying or planning.
So the LGA they've got their long established graduate scheme is sort of a generic. It's about the senior leaders of the future in local government. It's that sort of scheme. And actually, the lady who was just sat next to Gemma, who had to leave early, Agnieszka, is our graduate from that programme, who's come to see Personnel Committee today, but had to go off to another meeting. But the LGA have also now established a similar sort of programme specifically around finance, recognising the difficulties in that area. And I think they have got plans for other areas as well. But having said that, for some of those areas like surveyors, for example, there are really good established apprenticeship opportunities at degree level that we could tap into if we wanted to, look at that as part of our Grow Our Own. So it's just having the size and scope within a smaller district to provide the opportunities for those sorts of apprenticeships. But there are a number of different options that we could look at around some of those skill shortage areas. Same with solicitors and other areas as well.
I recall from my days at university that some people would go around the milk rounds and just take the first job that was offered them. So actually, that's a market we need to be in, really. We need to be there right at the beginning when people don't really know what they want to do, but they think, oh, that looks interesting.
And I think that's where we've got a really good USP as a sector. And when we go to careers fairs, like the ones shown on the pictures there, I really like it. I don't know if you're the same, Gemma. When you ask people what they want to do and they say don't know, it's a real good way of getting in, because you can say, well, local government, you've got such a range of roles and professions. It's a really great place to come because you can test out different jobs, different roles, different areas, and then decide where you want to sort of go. So I think that is a real USP for us as a sector. And I know the LGA are doing a lot of work around the brand of the sector as well that we'll be tapping into as part of our branding work.
So with the LGA doing our air war effectively, and our staff on the ground doing the actual day-to-day running of it, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape to be growing our own truly. So, Paul, you want to come back in? Please do.
Yeah, just a brief observation. I think it's lovely to see this. I think for a great many people, and perhaps Councillor Arnott might be in this category, you're joking, their perception and belief about apprentices comes from the first 20 minutes of Oliver. And they don't realise that apprentices come in all shapes and sizes, cover a whole array of jobs, and aren't simply plucked out of workhouses and thrust into the world of employment and locked in a coffin. So it's wonderful to see, and hopefully we can develop it more. And we had an 81% increase. Let's hope for more, because it's a great start for people to get into local government. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. And I know that you have an insider's knowledge about this as well. Other Paul Arnott, please.
Well, can I just say how wounded I am by that unevidenced assertion by my deputy leader, and how disappointed I am that in the whole of this meeting he hasn't referred to any of his own previous jobs, which was my main reason for coming today, to be honest. But,
Well, you came for an expose of Councillor Hayward's previous jobs. I hoped you'd come for Personnel Committee. It's so wonderful. Right, okay, so then nobody has any more comments or questions for Joe about this. And Gemma, thank you very much for that update, Gemma. So it says here...
Do we note it?
We are noting the update. Thank you very much. Do we need to vote on it? I don't think so. We don't need to vote on it, no. So thank you very much for the update, everybody, and please keep doing the good work. Right, I think, John, you wanted to say something, didn't you?
If we've come to the end of the agenda,
We are getting
yes.
to the end of the agenda.
Yes.
We're at the end of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the leader for outing one of our senior members of staff publicly, as he just has done, being a man of a certain age, to quote unquote, recently.
I think middle years was the term he used.
Yeah. We know what he meant, as ever. First of all, before I turn to Joe, I just want to apologise to Gemma, because I realise this is her first meeting, and I think we were a bit remiss in not welcoming her at the very beginning. So I know you have done subsequently, but I think it's important just say welcome on board to Gemma. So yes, turning to Joe. So this is a valedictory meeting. It feels as if the last 3.5 years or so have sped by, and I remember meeting you first of all across the airwaves, because it took a while to actually meet you face to face because we were in COVID. And if we all go back, those of us who were elected at that point, it was a challenging and difficult time in the organisation. And I think Jo came in and she brought a degree of stability and sensibility into the role, which was welcome and necessary. And I don't mean to make it sound as if you're sort of beige or anything. I think sometimes having stability and sensibility are incredibly good things to have. And you've steered us through some choppy waters over the last few years. And Chair, you mentioned earlier on something that Joe had been involved in updating policies, etc. And I just wanted to pick up on 3 or 4 other key points, and this isn't going to do justice to what Joe has done over the last few years with us. And in no particular order, you've helped us recruit 4 directors, a new CEO, at Strata. So you've been instrumental in supporting us through all of that. That's no mean feat, and I think, and I hope members will agree, we've actually got the right outcomes in each and every one of those recruitment exercises that we went through. You were instrumental in bringing in the pay and reward arrangements. That again was no mean feat. It's put us at a competitive advantage, I think, and I think that's partly why we did it. It's helped us in our recruitment and retention. And again, we've talked about that today. So the discussions that we had a few minutes ago around the figures will have been partly the positive aspect of our recruitment to retention will have partly come about through the pay and reward arrangements that you helped us introduce. You've given very clearly support and guidance, not only to your colleagues, but also to a number of us as members. And I have to say, as portfolio holder, it's been a privilege to work with you. In my working career, I worked with a number of directors of HR and heads of HR, both in private and public sector, small and large organisations. And, you are up there, I have to say. And I've been incredibly pleased to be able to work with you. So thank you for that. And I think it's quite apt that as you move on to your next phase of your career, which is around apprentices, that we have ended this meeting on the last set of slides that Gemma spoke to, and that is around the apprentices, the Grow Your Own. This is very much a passion of yours, one that you brought into this organisation, and one which, as the slides have demonstrated, have benefited us and the district immensely. So I thank you for that. And I leave you with 3 sets of numbers. And so the question is, Joe, do you know where they come from? And the numbers are 21 and 4. Well, you need to read your last slide. 20 apprentices, 1 graduate, 4 work experiences. So, that is something that you can be incredibly proud of. So I just want to say thank you and good luck.
There's another number as well, right at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah,
81.81% rise in apprenticeships between 2023 and now. Paul, Arnaud, please.
Thank you, Chair. I view this, I knew John was going to say something today, and my disappointment is I was hoping Jo would start crying almost immediately because she said she was going to. My pitch was going to be, I was going to see if I could do it in 12 words, and it was going to be, Dearest Jo. There we go. Speaking for all members from the bottom of our hearts. There we go, she's definitely leaking already. But if in the unlikely event you ever need a reference from me, and it is highly unlikely because you've got another job, but I would characterise you as being one of the most key people at this council in the last, 5 years of my leadership, certainly in our administration. And in this imaginary reference, the adjectives would be trusted, thorough, professional, kind, empathetic, funny, and warm. But overall, for this organisation, transformational. And from the bottom of my heart, and you know how sticky things were, you've turned this place round. Thank you. He's still not really weeping though, is she? I mean, this is very disappointing.
Paul.
Really the objective.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you again. Thank you for all your work. Tim, you would...
Yeah, I was just going to ask, saying, yeah, thank you to Jo for her work, but be interesting,
Yes, that would be good, actually. Microphone so we can capture the words.
interesting to know what the exact role you're going into. And
Might do the same. I'm going to work for the University of Exeter on their leadership and HR degree apprenticeships. So, yeah.
She's going off to find us more graduate apprentices. No, that's not what you're doing. Okay, well, oh yes, and subsequent unitary. Anyway, so thank you so much for everything you've done, Jo, and stay in touch. Well, I wanted to thank everybody here for coming all this way, everybody who's watching online for watching us online, and I managed it in under an hour and a half, which is great. We did even. Thank you very much to everybody else who's here. Goodbye.
Thank you.